Okay, so we're recording. So thank you for joining us. I think there's going to be a handful more joining as we start. So, Chris Anderson is with us tonight. He's a board member, a new board member of our Windsor Essex chapter, and he's also presenting one of I guess my opportunity to give a little bit of a spiel, but the Ontario CCI, the Ontario Education Committee from CCI has developed a 8-course condominium fundamentals series of courses, and this is one of them. We It was a slow rollout last year. We're going to try to make an effort to present two, maybe three of these a year. There are other chapters that are presenting these virtually. So if you had an interest, there's the CCI National Calendar. You can certainly take a look. If you're missing one course or something that particularly is of particular interest, you're welcome to join and log in through another chapter and attend it virtually. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Chris, and he'll start his presentation on today's thing, and I'll just continue to admit people, Chris. So go right ahead.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dustin. I really appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Anderson. I'm with Lionheart Property Management, based out of primarily London, Ontario. However, we are expanding to the Windsor Essex region, as well as eastwards towards the GTA, north towards Grand Bend, and south towards Port Stanley. Myself, I've been in the industry now for going on 11 years. You can believe that. I certainly can't. And our first item that we're going to be discussing tonight, and part of the presentation, is the meeting fundamentals, which is in the core course number 106 from the CCI. So without further ado, let's get into the meeting. I'm just going to share my screen now, and I'll put up the presentation. All right. So first item on the agenda, the meetings of owners. What are the meetings of owners? You have annual general meetings, requisition meetings, and special meetings. Of course, you have your your monthly directors meetings, aka board meetings. But what does really annual general meeting, requisition meeting, and special meeting really mean? Annual, pretty simple. It is done annually by the condo corporation. Requisition meetings are called on behalf of either the board or owners, and special meetings are for anything and everything in between. That's why they're so special. So first and foremost is the annual general meeting. So within 6 months of the condo's fiscal year end, whether that's a December 31st, January 31st, or anything in between, you must call and hold the annual meeting. Now, myself, I like to make sure that I don't have an issue with the audit first before you look to call and hold a meeting, since you do have to have the audit, or it's best to have the audit present at an annual meeting, and if possible, even to have the auditor present as well to answer any questions from the owners. That falls right into the first point, the presentation of the financial statements and auditor's report. They'll let you know if you're in good standing, whether they're giving you a clean audit opinion or they have to qualify the audit because maybe there's something uncommon or concerning in the financial statements. At the actual meeting itself, you'll need to make sure once the auditor has made their presentation, anybody's asked any questions they may have, and you've excused the auditor, keep in mind, don't have them there when you're appointing an auditor, whether that be the incumbent or a different one, if somebody would like to put forward a different option. Keep in mind that an auditor appointment is only mandatory under the Condominium Act for condos that have more than 25 units. All others that have less than 25 units can, but don't always, choose to waive the audit. But that must mean that every single one of the owners signs a release saying that they wish to waive the audit. If even one person does not say that they agree to waive the audit, the corporation must still call and hold or request an auditor to do an audit for the condo. In addition, you'll have the election of directors if you have any open positions, which As long as your property manager and your board are doing their job, there should be always at least one elected position open for election, because you want to have continuity on the board and not have everyone's election period come up at once. Some condos do choose to do a report from the board, or what's called a president's report, if desired. That is completely discretionary and up to the board and the president whether they wish to give one or not. It's only optional. Any other business, such as voting on bylaws, rule changes, amendments, any other maintenance items, can also be put on the agenda as well. The requisition meetings, owners of at least 15% of units and must be eligible to vote and listed in the record. What that means is that the ownership would like to call a meeting and it's not the annual meeting's time as of yet, they can do so by having at least 15% of the total unit ownership sign a requisition meeting and then delivering it in writing, signed, to the appropriate property management office. Now, keep in mind, these units do have to not be fraudulently recorded as far as the actual signatures go. So if people are going in and saying, hey, Bob, I need you to sign this. Well, what for? Don't worry about it. That can be signed under duress or without the owner actually knowing what they're signing for. So you have to verify as a property manager or member of your self-managed whether or not those requisitions are actually legitimate and whether they have the required 15%. Because what I have also seen in the past is requisitionists will go to anybody who is in the unit. And if that is not the owner who is on title, sometimes in various cases, it can be the tenant or a non-owner living in the unit, such as a son, daughter, mother, father, whoever, and they sign, that signature doesn't count. It has to be part of or on title, whoever is signing on the requisition form. So as far as the board's response to a valid requisition, you must call and hold the meeting within 35 days of receiving the requisition. Or again, my always first precedent choice, if possible, rather, is if the requisitionist consent and you ask them, you could call this requisition meeting, or you could wait another 2 weeks until the AGM is going to be called anyway. So you always try and negotiate with the requisitionist first if there's an issue that is placating, and you can address it in the AGM. It saves the condo on cost, saves the condo on duplicating process, and owners don't typically want to attend multiple meetings back to back. But do be advised that there is a 20-day preliminary notice period reduced to 15 days for those who are board members. Your prelim timeline gets reduced by 15 days in order to abide by the 35-day requisition timeline. As far as the contents of a requisition meeting, only vote on matters that can be decided on at an owner's meeting, such as, but not limited to, the removal of directors, removal of auditor, vote on a prepared rule amendment, whatever you may have, or discussion of an issue or a matter relating to the corporation that owners are unhappy about. It's not for matters that are just the board's jurisdiction. They also need to be called for a specific purpose. Some of them that I've seen in the past, I had a requisition meeting actually 2 years ago now, where the new green bin program that came into effect in London here, some owners were very unhappy with the fact that they had to use a green bin now for their organic garbage disposal. And they wanted to challenge the rule that the board had made related to this, that they had to store those containers inside their garages as opposed to just sitting in front of the units or at the rear of the units. So it has to be for something specific. It can also include, as is listed on the slide, to discuss upcoming work, to vote on a bylaw, to vote on a proposed rule, or to consider a proposed amendment to the declaration. keep in mind that only items listed on the agenda can be voted on. Part 2, notice. A notice of meeting, as anybody who is a property manager on the call can attest, must have been sent a minimum of 15 days before the meeting. And with the new preliminary notice that has come into effect in recent years, 20 days, that notice has to be sent out before
the meeting.
Join the meeting.
The condo also must use the mandatory government forms, which I know as myself as a condo manager, I'm both grateful for and not grateful for at the same time, because it does both streamline and also complicate the process. A little graphic for you guys to see the rough timeline on the preliminary notice versus the notice itself. Of course, this does also factor in a little bit of time, plus or minus 2 days for mailing if you're doing hard copies. And as far as the expedited time for the requisition meeting, so essentially with the requisition, you must call it very quickly. So you need to make sure when you get that requisition that the board is informed right away, because they need to be aware and be able to make decisions on what day they are going to be calling and holding that meeting for, since it's an expedited schedule. Some exemptions, meetings to fill vacancies when there are not enough directors to constitute quorum do not need a preliminary notice. Information certificates do replace preliminary notice. But what you want to make sure of is when you don't have enough directors to constitute quorum, or you're worried that, oh, Bob's not going to do his training, we might have to call and hold a meeting because there's only one other person on the board. If you can kind of see that coming a little bit in advance, that's going to serve you well, whether you're a property manager or a condo director that's potentially self-managed. The preliminary notice itself, the projected date of the meeting, keep in mind, this is not always the date the meeting falls on. It's just the projected date. You must also list the purpose of the meeting, a blank disclosure form for anybody that is wishing to have items added, declare their candidacy for the board, or add in any other new material they want into the agenda to be discussed. You also must give owners a timeline to submit their requests, and that has to be within, I believe it's 3 to 4 days prior to the notice going out. And the board is not required to include that information unless requests from the owners of 15% of units. Notice of meeting. Nature of the business to be conducted at the meeting, the optional agenda attachment, but always do it. It's so much easier to include an agenda because obviously anything that is included on the agenda can be voted on. Anything that's not included on the agenda cannot be voted on. As far as notice to mortgagees, as per section 46.1, the mortgagee has the right to be notified 20 days before the notice of the meeting, as well as their mortgagor. Director disclosure. It's not a prescribed form yet, but disclosure contracts, litigation, convictions under the Condo Act, and arrears of common expenses should always be disclosed for anybody that is looking to run for the board. As an owner, you want to be informed and make sure that the people who are running your corporation and that are acting in your best interests, or so you hope, are above board, making sure that they are acting in good faith and that they're not going to be a problem for you moving forward as a condo. Electronic meetings. Thankfully, we are now allowed to use electronic meetings, and we don't have to hold in-person meetings only anymore. The ability to hold electronic meetings and provide notice electronically not only cuts down on the cost associated with calling and holding a meeting, but it also permits a larger number of people to actually access the meeting from wherever they may be, whether that's on vacation down south, whether that is across the globe, whatever the case may be, everyone can join, assuming that they wish to do so. Excuse me. Part 3, meeting mechanics. Quorum. Quorum for a turnover, AGM, and any other meeting to elect directors or appoint an auditor. 25% of owners is needed on the first and second attempt, with 15% of owners being needed on the third subsequent attempt. One tip I can give you to the owners, if you want to ensure that you have quorum more often than not, I would strongly recommend that you have a electronic meeting and or a secondary partner, such as I've used Get Quorum in the past. And I cannot honestly tell you the last time that I had to recall a meeting because I didn't have quorum. The ability to have proxies electronically completed by owners is fantastic. It takes the owner on their end about 60 seconds if they want to, again, to complete the proxy, even if it's just for attendance, because half the time that's the biggest problem for a lot of corporations is just having the 25% attendance to actually conduct the AGM, which can result in a second attempt being needed or costs being incurred. And if the second attempt doesn't work, that's why it drops down to 15%. And again, there's more costs incurred on the condo side because of my fees as a manager, possibly your auditor's fees, and whoever else is involved at that point in time. But that's my little plug for Get Quorum, just because such good work for me over the past 8 years I've been using them. And I would definitely recommend them to anybody who is interested. If you want contact, let me know. I'm more than happy to provide that to anybody and everybody who's interested. Voting. Now, voting's evolved over the course of time. We used to be only by show of hands, as back in the ancient times. Then there was recorded votes to actually put down a selected candidate. Voting via proxy, who must be present, by the way, or via an electronic proxy. However, it's only ever one vote per unit, excluding the parking and lockers and service units, as we want to make sure that everyone is treated equally. Obviously, in the cases where one owner owns several units, they will have a little more power for voting than others. But otherwise, everyone is only ever entitled to one vote per unit. Voting requirements. For election of directors, majority of votes cast. Fairly standard. For removal of directors, majority of all units, not just the units present at the time of the meeting, has to be done. So such as a case with a 100-unit condo, you must have 50 units plus one in order to remove a director. That has to be done for each director if multiple are on the chopping block for removal. Cannot be just we get past the 50 plus 1% and all 3, all 5, all 7, whoever has been noted get eliminated or removed from the board. Has to be individual, because some owners may wish to remove some directors, but not others. As well, a person cannot be elected or appointed unless they consent to do so. So somebody can be elected at an AGM, but if I go back to them the following day and say, hey, Bob, you got elected onto the board, and he says, thanks, heck no, I don't want to be on the board, I can't force him to be on the board. The owner-occupied position, that is a position that recently came about due to the major metropolitan areas and the downtown locations such as Toronto that have the big skyscrapers, with the owners not being able to have their voices that live in the building represented, because so many units were bought up by investment buyers, and they would just freeze out other owners who actually lived in the building, so they couldn't get their issues addressed. So in that case, only owners that actually live in their unit can actually vote for those owner-occupied positions. That's typically only one on a board of 3, on a board of 5. Sometimes, but not always, it can be 2. Loss of right to vote. Now, this is a very touchy subject for many owners, but if anybody at the time of the AGM is in arrears for 30 days or more prior to the meeting, they cannot vote. They also don't count towards quorum. Corporation must update these records the date of the meeting just to avoid dispute, but the chair of the meeting will decide whether there is a dispute or not. Mortgagee voting. Mortgagees can sometimes vote on behalf of the unit owner if the mortgage document grants authority to. The mortgagee has notified the corporation 20 days before the notice of meeting that they intend to vote. The mortgagee has given notice of intention to vote at least 4 days before the meeting, and you must have proof of that. Second mortgagee may vote if the first chooses not to do so. This is not very common as far as mortgagees voting. However, it does still happen on occasion. Now, what is a proxy? Definitely use a prescribed form. It can be used for quorum only, procedural matters, all matters subject to the directors. On the proxy form, as is standard, the property manager will be correctly filling out, hopefully, the items to be discussed, whether that is a vote for an owner-occupied position, whether that is a vote on a bylaw, a vote on a standard director position, on a change to the declaration, whatever the case may be, that must be described on the proxy and then given the option to vote for the respective candidates and or to say yes or no to matters relating to bylaws and declarations. A power of attorney for a unit owner may also have the right to vote as well and complete a proxy as well. Now, soliciting proxies. Owners, occupants, tenants, directors can solicit proxies. However, property managers, we cannot solicit proxies. That's why anytime my boards ask me, well, can you give us an idea of what the proxies look like? I lock it behind a wall that I can't even access until 12 p.m. the day of the meeting so that I can't influence how the proxies will be done. And I can clearly state to my ownerships, I had nothing to do with this. I don't even have access until 12 p.m. that day. Some proxies count as a ballot. Some give the proxy owner the right to a ballot. It depends on how it's actually filled out. The owner can choose to appoint a proxy holder, but then they can also choose to say, you have carte blanche, vote how you will, or Bob, I want you to vote for Chad because he's running for the board. And if the owner votes on the proxy, then Bob has no choice but to vote for Chad because the proxy already names Chad as the vote on that. Managing proxies. Accounting for proxies is challenging. Pre-registration of proxies is always recommended, and that's another reason why I always recommend Get Quorum. Their proxy software is, in my opinion, by far the best. Their dashboard that you get as the manager and or if you're self-managed board as the board members is fantastic. They will tell you exactly how many, again, on the day of have voted, how many have voted in favor or against a bylaw or declaration amendment, and how many votes a candidate received and by who at that 12 o'clock day of point. Now, one thing to note as well is as far as setting a cutoff date, we always will typically set a date of 5 p.m. the day before as the proxy cutoff date. Just because we need to make sure that any paper proxies are properly entered, validated, and make sure that we don't have any owners that are in arrears that are being counted towards quorum and are being given voting power. Good thing to consider is a bylaw to require proxies to be deposited with the secretary on or before the meeting, as I was just mentioning, but it is not mandatory to put together a bylaw for that. Part 4, conduct of owners' meetings. I'm guessing everyone is probably pretty familiar with this. Plan as much as you possibly can for the seamless meeting. You want to make sure that you run a dry run with your directors before a meeting, or at least have, at the very bare minimum, a conversation so that everyone knows what's going to happen. Now, as well, you'll need to appoint a chair during the meeting. This can come in a couple different ways, but typically I always defer to the president of the corporation to chair the meeting. If they choose not to do it and none of the other to do it, they can appoint the property manager as the chair of the meeting. But again, it depends on how the manager feels as well as how the board feels. You want to make sure that you don't have anybody that is in the chair position that doesn't feel comfortable, and as well that is not able to discern what needs to be done one way or the other. A couple items that the chair would be responsible for is to set the ground rules, establishing the rules of order, start on time, calling the meeting to order, ensuring that all can see and hear. Anyone who's not an owner or proxy holder must be invited or asked to leave. Obviously, case in point with the auditor, we excuse them at the end of their presentation and they leave the meeting. Engineers, if one's present, translator or owner's lawyer, depending on, again, what the context is. The chair must also define what quorum is present for this meeting and note whether the meeting is duly constituted. As far as minutes being recorded, but that will be dependent on the actual secretary, and failing that, it online. It can be also done by the recording software, such as we are recording tonight's Zoom meeting. A good thing to prepare for as well is for director votes, is to arrange for scrutineers. For anybody that is looking to serve as a scrutineer, they will have to make sure that the proper ballots are being counted, both online, electronically, and via any hard copies. Then as well, introducing the head table, the property manager, the board members, any of the professionals who may or may not be at that meeting. Managing questions, receiving motions and amendments, rule out of order if required, explain votes and announce results, rule on points of order, and properly terminate the meeting by asking for a motion to adjourn. Minutes. Now, minutes are subject to being reasonably accurate. They must be made available to owners after the meeting, although there's no exact timeline on when that is. The contents must include at least the date, time, location, and list of attendees, the record of all votes or motions, and succinct description of business. For the AGM, issue with notice of the AGM, yes, you always want to make sure that the actual draft, because until they are approved at a subsequent AGM, those AGM minutes are still in draft form and subject to review and approval by the ownership. Virtual meetings. As I was saying earlier, these are some of my favorite. With the notice of meeting, included clear information and instructions for owners about how the meeting will be held and how owners can participate and vote. You want to make sure that you make it as smooth and streamlined for everyone as possible. Include the link to the virtual meeting as many times as you need to in order to make it as easy as possible for people to register and attend the meeting. And at the very least, if they can't, complete their proxy. At the outset of the meeting, you want to make sure that you review all technical matters with participation and voting in the meeting prior to, such as we did tonight, actually before the majority of people joined on. And we did have a couple issues, but we got through them pretty quickly. Part 5, directors meeting. Directors meet to carry out the business of the corporation. Bylaw may specify the frequency, whether that be monthly, every other month, quarterly, annual. Very rare it's going to be either annual or twice a year, because that's not really what you need. I'd say the bare minimum, you want to have quarterly meetings, if not more frequent. Larger corporations will need more frequent meetings since they have more moving parts, such as elevators, sometimes amenities like pools, hot tubs, saunas, gyms, etc. Calling a director's meeting, you want to try and give notice 10 days before the meeting or per your bylaws, whether that be personally, prepaid mail, courier, or electronic communication, aka email, or per bylaws. Now, typically, what I like to do is at the end of one board meeting, I will schedule with my board who's still on the call the next board meeting. So we want to make sure that everyone's available on that date. And obviously, if anything changes during that time, we can make that determination if we need to push that meeting forward or pull it back a little bit as far as timeline. But again, it makes it easier if you can try and set the meeting at your current meeting because everyone's on that call at that time. Quorum. Majority of the total number of positions on a board. That is very simple. Board of 3, need minimum of 2. Board of 5, minimum of 3. Board of 7, minimum of 5, and so on and so forth. Decisions are made by the majority of votes cast, such as the case with, I'm just going to use the Board of 3 scenario. If 2 out of 3 directors are in agreement, but 1 is not in agreement, that motion can still proceed, that work, that whatever can still proceed. That other director can be noted as in opposition to the motion or whatever the case is. But unfortunately, they are overruled in that scenario. You cannot conduct business without a quorum at a duly constituted meeting. Therefore, it's not duly constituted. If there is a vacancy, you can continue with a vacancy or appoint somebody until the next AGM. One thing I'll note on that is that a lot of people probably are aware that the CAO introduced mandatory director training. Please, if you get elected onto a board, complete your training. It is not only a headache for yourself as a director to get kicked off the board, but it's also a very big headache for us as property managers to have you be reappointed or reelected, depending on the case, back onto the board. And in some cases, if that removal for lack of director training results in not enough directors to constitute quorum on the board, we have to call a whole loss of quorum meeting, which is also added expense to the corporation. I thought that I already did minutes. Yeah, I think I already did minutes, didn't I? Oh, my apologies. Yeah, I think that's it. Do we have any questions from anyone?
Anybody have any questions for Chris? Sorry, my screen's jumping around here.
Take your time.
Nobody?
While you guys are thinking on that, I'm just going to have a quick sip of water because that was 30 minutes of talking straight. So excuse me for a moment.
No? No questions? Chris, I think you did a great job. I guess there's no questions. Can I let people know that if they do think of a question, are they able to reach out to you?
Of course.
Do you have, I don't know if you just want to rattle off your email, or if it's handy, if you want to share it on the screen somehow, but type it in the chat, whatever's easiest.
Probably the type in the chat would be easy because everyone can just note it at their convenience. Then I think didn't I stop sharing my screen, or did I not?
You're still sharing.
My apologies.
Yep,
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat for everyone right now.
I think there's a question here now. We'll just offline.
Got a question, Chris? Go ahead, Paul and Sherry.
I guess just a question. A lot of things in the act, and but I guess the situations seem to be starting to arise where people or directors not know that they can basically ignore a lot of the things in the act, and there's no repercussions at all. Especially, I mean, there is the thing of owners can request a meeting, but a lot of times I don't think owners know really what's going on, and a lot of them are reluctant to run, especially in small condominium corporations. But it seems to be, I guess, is there any? I mean, other than trying to have an owners meeting, requisition a meeting, is there any other methodology except for those few things that the condominium authority actually deals with, which are, none of it pertains to really how boards run or anything like that. So just curious.
Unfortunately, there's nothing at this moment that is going to be helpful to that, Paul. I can tell you there is proposals rather affecting condominiums that are coming down the pipeline. There's actually a consultation on proposed regulations regarding condo owners meetings and the expansion of the condominium authority tribunal's jurisdiction to include owners meetings. That's in the process of being looked at right now. And what I can do, I'm going to CC, or not CC rather, but I'm going to pop this in the link. And this is coming from, or the chat rather, this is coming from the CAO. If it lets me actually paste it, or maybe it won't. But there is proposals coming down the pipeline. It's they're looking for written feedback on potential changes, and they're encouraging condo owners to provide them by March 10th.
Thank you.
What I'll do is I'll copy the URL and I'll put that in the chat if it allows me to do so, which it looks like it does. Beautiful. So that's there for you, Paul. Take a read at it at your convenience. But if you need further help or further assistance, I'm more than happy to talk with you as a sidebar conversation aside from this meeting.
Yeah, thank you. No, I've heard it anecdotally, some other a number of condominium corps that, things like, you mentioned there about, how meetings are run. They, email votings taking place all the time in lot and all these type of things. And I guess it's and then there's nobody there to slap your hands. It's just a slippery slope that seems to get, more and more and more. So anyway,
that's why you got to get a really good property manager that not only knows their stuff, but it's going to make sure that everything is done to the letter of the law. Because again, now that we're licensed, we're a little more accountable because condo owners such as yourself can not only complain to the CAO, but you can complain to the CMRAO, which that's the governing body that actually facilitates our licenses. Mm-hmm. So if we get called into the CAO or the CMRAO rather, that means something for us because we don't want to have a stain on our records if we can avoid them. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting because I've heard that some management companies, the response is, well, the owners are doing it, so I'm just doing it's not my fault. It's the owner. It's the director. Sorry. So that's both true and not true. We do take our direction from the board of directors, but we also have to govern ourselves by our code of ethics as well. So we can't just say, oh yeah, we didn't see that guy get shot. The guy got shot and we saw it. So we have to make sure that we're abiding by the rules as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good answer.
Anybody else? Any questions for Chris? No, I don't think so. Thank you, Chris. Chris's information is in the chat. You reach out to him certainly if you have any questions in regards to meetings. And thank you everybody for joining us on these cold Tuesday night. I think our next meeting, our next seminar is, I don't have the date, late March, but keep an eye out on an email to sign up for that. It'll be coming up very quickly, so another 2 months or so from now. So yeah, if there's nothing else, thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see everybody soon. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, everyone.